The Baltic Offensive, also known as the Baltic Strategic Offensive, denotes the campaign between the northern fronts of the Red Army and the German Army Group North in the Baltic States during the autumn of 1944. The result of the series of battles was the isolation and encirclement of the Army Group North in the Courland Pocket and Soviet reoccupation of the Baltic States. Background: in 1944, the Wehrmacht was pressed back along its entire front line in the east. In February 1944, it retreated from the approaches to Leningrad to the prepared section of the Panther Line at the border of Estonia. In June and July, Army Group Center was thrown back from the Belarusian SSR into Poland by Operation Bagration. This created the opportunity for the Red Army to attack towards the Baltic Sea, thereby severing the land connection between the German army groups. By the 5th of July, the Silesia offensive commenced, as a follow-in from Operation Bagration. The Soviet 43rd, 51st, and 2nd Guards armies attacked towards Riga on the Baltic coast with 3rd Guards Mechanized Corps in the van. By the 31st of July, the coast on the Gulf of Riga had been reached. 6th Guards Army covered Riga and the extended flank of the penetration towards the north. The German reaction was rapid and initially successful. A counterattack, code-named Operation Doppelskopf, was conducted on the 16th of August by 4X and 39th Panzer Corps under the command of 3rd Panzer Army. Army Group Center, acting in coordination with armored formations from Army Group North, they initially cut off the Soviet troops on the coast, and re-established a tenuous 30-kilometer-wide corridor connecting Army Groups Center and North. The main objective of the attack was to retake the key road junction of Silesia, but the German tanks ran head-on into an in-depth defense by the 1st Baltic Front, and by the 20th of August the German advance had stalled with heavy losses. A follow-on attack, code-named Operation Kassa and launched on the 16th of September, failed in the same manner. After a brief period of respite, SDAVKA issued orders for the Baltic Strategic Offensive, which lasted from 14 September to 24 November. Battles. In common with other Soviet strategic offensives, the Baltic Offensive covers a number of operational-level operations and individual front offensive operations. The Riga Offensive was carried out by the 3rd and 2nd Baltic Fronts and cleared the coast of the Gulf of Riga. The Tallinn Offensive was carried out by the Leningrad Front to drive German forces from mainland Estonia. The Moonsund landing operation was the amphibious landing on the Estonian islands of Hiiumaa, Saaremaa and Muhu, which block access to the Gulf of Riga. According to Soviet data, Germany lost 7,000 dead soldiers and 700 captured. The Memel Offensive was an attack by the 1st Baltic Front aimed at severing the connection between the German army groups Center and North. For the German defensive perspective, the period included the following operations. Operation Kassa aimed at the restoration of contact between Army Groups Center and North 16 to 21 September 1944. Operation Asta aimed at the evacuation of Army Group North from mainland Estonia 17 to 26 September 1944. The Siege of Memel 5 to 27 October 1944. Formation of the Courland Pocket 15 to 22 October 1944. Aftermath. Soviet victory. The Baltic Offensive operation resulted in the expulsion of German forces from Estonia and Lithuania. The Soviet fronts involved in the battle lost a total of California, 260,000 men to all causes. Communication lines between Army Group North and Army Group Center were permanently severed, and the former was relegated to an occupied Baltic seashore area in Latvia. On the 25th of January, Adolf Hitler renamed Army Group North to Army Group Courland, implicitly recognizing that there was no possibility of restoring a new land corridor between Courland and East Prussia. The Red Army commenced the encirclement and reduction of the Courland cauldron, which retained a possibility of being a major threat, but were able to focus on operations on its northern flank that were now aiming at East Prussia. Operations by the Red Army against the Courland Pocket continued until the surrender of the Army Group Courland on the 9th of May 1945, when close to 200,000 Germans were taken prisoner there. The German command released thousands of native conscripts from military service. However, the Soviet command began conscripting Baltic natives as areas were brought under Soviet control, while some ended up serving on both sides. Many partisans hid in the woods to avoid conscription. 112 Hero of the Soviet Union awards were given out during the offensive, of which 3 were given soldiers' second award. Reoccupation of the Baltic States. Soviet rule of the Baltic States was re-established by force, and Sovietization followed, which was mostly carried out in 1944 to 1950. The forced collectivization of agriculture began in 1947, and was completed after the mass deportation of civilians in March 1949. All private farms were confiscated, and farmers were made to join the collective farms. An armed resistance movement of Forest Brothers was active until the mass deportations. Tens of thousands participated or supported the movement. Thousands were killed. The Soviet authorities fighting the Forest Brothers suffered also hundreds of deaths. Among those killed on both sides were innocent civilians. Besides the armed resistance of the Forest Brothers, a number of underground nationalist schoolchildren groups were active. Most of the members were sentenced to long terms of imprisonment. The punitive actions decreased rapidly after Joseph Stalin's death in 1953. From 1956 to 1958, a large part of the deportees and political prisoners were allowed to return to their homelands. Political arrests and numerous other kind of crimes against humanity were committed all through the occupation period until the late 1980s. Although the armed resistance was defeated, the populations remained anti-Soviet. This helped the Baltic citizens to organize a new resistance movement in the late 1980s and then rapidly develop a modern society after the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991. Formations and units involved. Soviet 1st Baltic Front commanded by General Ivan Bagramian. 5th Guards Tank Army commanded by General Volosky. 6th Guards Army commanded by Lieutenant General I.M. Chistyakov. 4th Shock Army commanded by Lieutenant General Malyshev. 43rd Army commanded by Lieutenant General Afanazy Beloborodov. 51st Army commanded by Lieutenant General Iowa G. Kreiser. 33rd Army commanded by Lieutenant General Svetov. 3rd Air Army, 2nd Baltic Front commanded by Army General Andrei Yeryomenko. 3rd Shock Army commanded by Lieutenant General N.P. Simonyak. 22nd Army commanded by Lieutenant General Vostrukov. 3rd Baltic Front commanded by Colonel General I. Maslenikov. 3rd Belarusian Front commanded by Army General Ivan Chernyakovsky. 2nd Shock Army commanded first by Lieutenant General P. G. Chanchibadze, then by Lieutenant General I. Fedorninsky. 3rd Guards Mechanized Corps commanded by Lieutenant General V. T. Obakov. 61st Army commanded by Lieutenant General Belov. 67th Army commanded by Lieutenant General Sviridov. Leningrad Front commanded by Marshal L. A. Govorov. 8th Army commanded by Lieutenant General Sterikov. German Army Group North commanded by Colonel General Ferdinand Schorner. Army Detachment Nawa commanded by Infantry General Grasso. 18th Army commanded by Infantry General Locke. 16th Army commanded by Artillery General Hansen. 502nd Heavy Panzer Battalion. Army Group Center commanded by Colonel General Reinhardt. 3rd Panzer Army commanded by Colonel General Erhard Raus. XXXX Panzer Corps. 39th Panzer Corps. Panzer Grenadier Division Großdeutschland. 4th Panzer Division. 5th Panzer Division. 17th Panzer Division.